Yeah, I think we should go ahead and start with a little introduction action. I'll go first. We'll go in picture order. Hey everybody, my name is Ricky Cecchini. I'm the VP of Product at CloudRadial. We'll discuss what CloudRadial is if you don't know in a little bit of a moment. I guess a little bit about me. I've been with our company for a very long time, about 3.5 years or so. I was the first employee here, and I've kind of been all over the industry. And today, I'm going to be talking about with Addigy, the our co-partner as far as vendors go, and then Roman, who is a shared customer of both of us, talking about Apple devices, talking about, in my case, how that kind of interacts with the customer experience, how to round that out, and how to make Apple a core part of your customer experience. And then Roman, tell us a little bit about you. What you up to?
Yep. So my name is Roman Marzalek. I'm the owner of Dr. Logic, and we'll be 20 in October. So I've been doing this for a while. And we're a Mac-focused MSP. As Ricky said, we're using both Addigy. We've used Addigy for years and years and years. And we started using CloudRadial when we switched to Autotask as our PSA a couple of years ago. And it's been absolutely great. And I'm just a Mac fanatic. I mean, since I was 10, I've been using Mac. So I know Mac all the way back to System 4.2 from like 1986. So I've seen it from pretty much the beginning.
Which is a great reason, by the way, to have you on here, because we were going to ask a lot of questions. So like, what did it used to be like?
Yeah, in 1997.
Right. It's like, tell me about the state of Mac in 2002, please.
Yeah, it was good. Actually, I think the last thing on that, what used to be really great when Macs were very, very niche was when there was a keynote. I'd been listening to Steve Jobs or watching it. And in fact, the first time I watched it, his voice was so incongruous with his face. It was a bit of a shock. But I used to be able to tell clients the next day, hey, Apple's released this and they're doing this. And these days, and for quite a while, because everyone now knows, clients tell me what's gone in the keynote. So that's long gone, that kind of magic.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, John, your turn.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us, Ricky and Roman. It's always great to talk to you. I'm the head of product at Addigy. We'll obviously go deeper into the product in a little bit. I've been in the Apple space now for 12 or 13 years, the last 4 of which I've been with Addigy. And overall, though, I go way back in tech. I used to be a programmer, and then I don't know what happened where got out of the tech work and more onto the product side of things. But excited to take you through all the things we're doing together. So kick us off, Ricky.
Yeah, I think our general plan, I hate doing webinars where it's lectures. So I thought this would be kind of more interesting if we kind of did like a little Q&A, show and tell, and also just discussing some really interesting stuff. We got a lot of really interesting, at least statistics, for sure, hard reports to talk about, and why we threw together this webinar is not necessarily to sell you guys stuff, but to discuss something that I think a lot of people are not aware of, which again is, what is the state of Apple today? How are you going to manage that? How can that be a good opportunity? And why maybe you shouldn't be afraid or like hesitant to jump into really Apple management, especially for business, right? So first things first, we've added a couple of different like polls throughout, just for a little, honestly, questions, research for us as well. So one of these is going to be, how many Apple devices do you currently manage today, right? And we know, again, I'll speak on the CloudRadial side. A lot of our partners are Windows-only shops, or they get the odd one, right? Sometimes they're like the marketing department has a couple of iMacs, and that's always like a little gray area. And then like Roman, right? Sometimes you have the ones that are fully into it, and they're all bought in, and they just really understand how to manage that and how to scale that. So certainly, how many, I mean, I'm seeing the numbers right now. It looks like the majority of those that are answering are between 1 and 50, which is about what I expect. John, do you see the same for yourself? I'm going to ask you some questions too for Addigy people. What's the average number of Macs that partners manage?
What we typically see is for our MSP customers is of the total devices they're managing, if they're doing Apple, it's going to be like 20 to 30% of their overall fleet. Like Roman, we do have a number of MSP customers who are very Apple focused. So 90 to 100% of their devices are Macs. But again, so based on how big you are, there's probably 20 or 30% Average customer 100, 150, 200. But we've got customers all the way from 25 devices to, I think our largest customer, 8,000 to 9,000 devices.
Dang. Wow. Yeah, that's killer. And again, thank you guys. Again, we're going to come back to some of these poll results and discuss and kind of talk about how they affect everything. I think I can share the results. I think my shadow assistant here, Trish, is doing so. But again, yeah, you hopefully you'll be able to see that as well. And we'll discuss what that really means for, again, trying to hopefully get you guys into more Apple management and how that can be very profitable as well. I'm going to run through a brief thing for those, again, that don't know who CloudRadial is. Again, I'm representing CloudRadial on this webinar. CloudRadial is, in short, a CSA. If you don't know what that is, that's cool because we made it up. It's the customer services automation. It's kind of like the yin yang to a PSA. So everyone's familiar for the most part with a PSA system, right? You got your auto tasks, your ConnectWise, your Kaseya BMS, your Halos, you name it. Generally speaking, that's going to be your back end as far as the MSP or IT provider. You run your day-to-day stuff back there, and that's cool. And you kind of live there. The concept of a CSA is the flip side. So what are you doing for your customers? I've said this analogy a bunch of times. If you think of the PSA as like a restaurant, that's kind of like the back of house. That's where you're cooking and preparing the meal, getting all the stuff ready. The front of house is where you actually entertain the customers, make sure they're having a good time, right? So what we do is we take a bunch of different features. Some of them are built by us, right? So our own ticket catalog or our knowledge base or our dashboards, it's all native CloudRadial, but a lot of the power in CloudRadial is not in just what we do. It's in the various tools, services, solutions that we integrate with, Addigy being a really good one, right? We're seeing up here. And just talking about how you can take all those different services, synthesize them into something that is accessible, and make that kind of something that anybody can understand, get into, and really understand the value that you bring to them. So just like a PSA is your home base, a CSA is their home base. And that's something that we try to do to increase some stickiness between you and your clients. And again, just help you build a better relationship. And again, throughout the theme of this webinar, we're going to be talking about what that means, how Apple devices tie into it. And again, not even just for Apple, but Apple and Windows together. And again, to a non-technical person who may not even really see the difference in them, why that's okay and how that kind of translates to the customer experience. We're both going to do Addigy and CloudRadial. We'll do our brief little demos for those that haven't seen it. Specifically, we'll also talk about how we work together if you haven't seen that. Brief screenshot is this. This is an example of our home page. Again, we'll kind of talk about some of the functionality. To be fair, again, we're not really here to sling products so much as to talk about what this stuff is and how it affects everything. So for today's webinar, I'm going to be talking about how all of these things kind of appeal more towards the QBR, TBR, greater strategic benefits of Apple devices. And I would love to pass it off to you, John, to talk about who Addigy is for those that haven't heard of Addigy.
Oh, thanks. Well, first of all, that restaurant analogy, now I'm hungry. So thanks for that. Let's go on to the next slide. So Addigy is based in beautiful Miami, Florida. I'm actually based in Minnesota. So in the winter, I try to be down there as much as possible to work face to face with the team. Much better weather, and the snow is about 3 feet shallower. Right. But Addigy at its heart is all about managing Apple devices. We run into a lot of customers who maybe they're trying to get by with, if they're using a Kaseya or a ConnectWise or whatever else, they've got agents and things for the Mac. But again, Addigy goes to that next level. We've got an agent that we put onto the device, but then we're also tied deeply into Apple's mobile device management frameworks to be able to take that next level. So part of it is those basic MDM sorts of features you get out of the box. A Macintosh is delivered to a user, they open it, and the moment that device opens, it immediately enrolls in Addigy. We're able to push software onto that machine. We're able to secure that machine. You're able to compare that user against integrated IDPs to see who are they. And when we put software on the machine and we secure the machine, we do it in an unobtrusive way. Again, the critical part of Addigy is with that deep tie-in to Apple and MDM. When we put software on the machine understands it's trusted because you're connected to Addigy, it's trust, and then the user doesn't have to click through a lot of dialogues to make things happen. But we're also going to a lot of work in terms of automating workflows. So if you're monitoring for disk getting full or things like that, you can get automatic alerting when those things happen, but also go to the next step to remediate those sorts of things when they happen. So next slide. And again, this is just a quick screenshot of when you're looking at an individual device inside of Addigy. We've actually got real-time information. If that device is online, if let's say you've gotten a help desk ticket and you go to look up the device, you can quickly see, oh, the CPU is pegged, or what's memory look like, or I need to quickly push software onto those. We'll do a little bit of a deeper dive on that when we get in there.
For sure.
Ricky and I were talking about, should I share the PowerPoint? Should he share the PowerPoint? But we thought it's so much better when we can talk to each other and say, all right, next slide, next slide.
Next one. But also, I love a good harsh, like, next one. I like seeing in person whenever someone struggles with the remote. I don't have that problem, but I'll pretend. I'll be like,
right,
oh,
right. Yeah.
Or they go 3 steps forward and then you have to go back 2, and then everyone's like, you spoiled it. I know what you're going to talk about.
Right.
But
right.
This one is the opening question. I think this is important. This is also really the reason that we brought in Roman, right? Because again, I know that it's one thing to watch 2 vendors chit chat, but it's another thing whenever it's like real life thing. And this is the golden question that before we talk about anything is why? Why should MSPs bother doing Apple, not just stay away from them?
Yeah, don't bother. No.
Right. It's like webinar over. Thanks, everybody.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, well, I guess it's my job to make money using the tools that you sell and develop. Well, I mean, firstly, it's like, well, it'd be good to just talk about how things got to this point. In the same way as with Windows, we used to use Ghost to image Windows. Imaging was the way to go, and it was very much the same way on Macs. So you'd build the machine as you wanted it, then you'd image it. And then with all the machines, you'd gradually use a server to send those images out over the network, and you could build, 50, 20, 100, whatever computers. And the switch to management from imaging really came when the iPhone came out and Apple was trying to beat BlackBerry and get into enterprise. And at that point, it had to develop MDM for the iPhone. And once they learned from that, they then brought that technology over to the Mac. It all coincided with better internet connection speeds as well. And before, when you'd go on site, because that's the only way you could look after machines, you were then able to do remote screen sharing. You had the advent of cloud-controlled networking devices, and it used to be the case that you'd have like an admin port on the back of a switch. You'd have to plug it in, use terminal commands. So really, part of it's iPhone, part of it's better bandwidth, and obviously as well, if you're downloading like large chunks of installer data, like Adobe Photoshop and stuff, which is a few gig, that just wasn't possible. So really, that's all culminated in the current situation where you have MDM, and you're not thinking about imaging. Oh, and also data on a device is not really a worry anymore. You can usually wipe stuff because everyone should be keeping all their data in the cloud. But why? I mean, for MSPs that are Windows focused, it's another avenue. A lot of companies who were traditionally Windows are now going hybrid. You've got very large enterprise companies. IBM is both Windows and Mac. And industries traditionally who were kind of Windows based, so like lots of financial services. With the advent of fintech, a lot of these banks and insurance companies and other financial services are actually deciding to start from Mac from the beginning. And again, with that halo effect, with a lot of people having Macs at home, they want to start a company. They think, well, why not? And we've got an insurance company. There are about 2,000 people. They are all Mac. And they started all Mac, and we started working with them when there were 35 users. So really, if you are able to offer Mac management as well as Windows management, it just opens you up to much more opportunities. And also, it's more niche. There's less competition. That is changing, but Windows only support. That MSP world is very, very packed. So it's an opportunity to go into new markets and make more money. And these days, with the fact that a lot of stuff is more cloud-based and a lot of the administration work and troubleshooting you're doing is more about the coordination of different cloud services and the management maintenance of those, the actual amount of time that you're going to be spending on an OS issue or an application issue is going to be much, much less. And again, one of the things about macOS, it's relatively simple, not much goes wrong. You're not having to sort of dig around in the registry. It's much more straightforward. So actually, that's probably why we ended up choosing Mac. It's easier to support. So it's not that difficult. There's not much you have to learn. Apple has some really good training courses as well to get you started too, just generally. Yeah.
And what a lot of the things that we see too, you know, when you talk about these organizations, one of the things we see when people are recruiting for talent, and even where the economy is today, it's still hard to find people. But a lot of customers we see are offering choice. And it's a way to recruit new people, right? Like some people are used to a Mac, some people are used to Windows. They come in, you say, pick your platform. And, you know, oh, I like Mac, I can come in, I can do that. And, you know, to reiterate again, like so many of our MSP customers who may have been Windows first, there's still a lot of Macs floating around that, you know, it can be a quick win to be able to go pick those, bring those into your portfolio to be able to help support them. Not to mention too, as we're seeing people looking more and more for cyber insurance and those sorts of things. Auditors come in before you can buy your insurance and they're like, what are you doing about the Macs over here? You need to protect those. Same way you're dealing with your Macs as well. And again, I had actually worked inside of IBM. I saw all the Lenovo's back in the day, and I was able to make the change from PC guy for years and years to Mac to building software like this. And it's frightening at first, but if I can do it, anybody can do it. So it's just a really great opportunity to be able to grow your business. And the second part of that too is if you're looking for new business, right, and you approach a potential customer, you come in with some Apple expertise, so you're using an Addigy to be able to help you with that. You're going to stand out from some of the competition that comes in and says, we only do Windows, those Apple things, take care of them on their own. And as we get a little bit later in this today too, we'll help you with a little bit of kind of the state of the union in terms of where Apple's at when it comes to security and why it is important to help educate those people on you need to manage those Macs the same way you do with your Windows devices. So we can go on to the next slide.
Yeah, and the next slide is again one of the main reasons why we even are doing this webinar. I was talking to some people. I'll bring it back around to at the end, but the question I had just posed casually was just like, how long have people been doing this? And we know for a fact that it's becoming like a lot more common to see Macs and not just Macs, right? We're talking about Macs. Sometimes we use that interchangeably, but really Apple devices as a whole in these environments. And Addigy did a pretty badass study that covers a bunch of stuff. And John, maybe you want to speak to this. I'm going to pull up the study in a second, but this is one of the biggest things that I think is why people are asking about this in the first place, which is the challenge.
Yeah, it's we did this survey last year. We went out to our MSP customers and just said, so you know, what are the biggest challenges you face when it comes to Apple devices? And again, Ricky's right on. When we say Macs, I should be saying Apple devices, but we're talking about across the board because what you can do with Macs, you can do with iOS and vice versa. But again, as you go down this list, you're going to see it's really no different than what you face in the Windows world or Linux or servers. First and most critical thing to keeping those devices safe and secure, again, is that operating system up to date. And again, Apple gives you a robust way to update operating systems. But again, you need a solid MDM to be able to really pull that off and not destroy somebody's day by, I laugh saying with a OS update going in the middle of a keynote and watch me get booted off here for something, but I look good, I think. And again, when there is a problem with a machine, you want to be able to connect to that machine and be able to take a look at it and fix it quickly. One of the things I like about Addigy and the live capabilities, what we call them, you'll hear us talk about go live and things like that, is it's as close as you can come to actually sitting down in front of a machine to troubleshoot it. I'm old enough to remember when we used to have IT help right in the office. I had a problem with my computer. They'd come to my desk or I could go to their desk and they'd fix it. And again, with these tools, you're able to do that hands-on experience, whether you're on the command line desktop sharing, things like that, so you can fix it quickly. But again, at the end of the day, too, first and foremost is maintaining security and compliance. We have a whole compliance engine built into Addigy, so you're able to go and say, the device meets this criteria, let it onto the network, things like that. Installing the latest patches, making sure all the software on the machine is safe and secure. And again, that new user onboarding. If you have a new employee who comes into your company and they get an amazing experience when that computer is handed to them, it just works, right? Everything's there. Right out of the gate, they're like, hey, you know, this is a legit company. I'm glad I came here to work. And again, these are exactly the same sorts of problems we run into, whatever the platform is. And again, we have a link to the full survey, so you can read through it.
Yeah.
It goes into great detail.
Let's talk about that, because that's something that we want to make available and we wanted to talk about. I believe we're going to share this PowerPoint with everybody that signed up. So whether you're watching it now, watching it later, this image itself is the hyperlink to it. I think this should open it up. There we go. And I have, can you guys see the screen okay? I think I'm sharing everything and not just the PowerPoint.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. Go ahead and just, download that report. It'll take you straight through it. But take a look at this, because again, a lot of the reason that we're doing this webinar was derived off of this. So it's, yes, like it's that one chart, but in general, it's some interesting statistics that talk about like what's the charge rates per user, like is it higher margin or opportunity costs to get in there. Again, a lot of misconceptions that not just, right, MSPs are obviously pretty good about researching, having an objective understanding, but also overcoming misconceptions from customers who still believe things like Macs don't get viruses, not possible, right? So it's like, that's something that for some reason, like business owners still think. So they're just like, we did that on purpose because then big brain wouldn't need to get IT help. It's like, oh, whoops, not true. So definitely, guys, take a look at this, because again, it's going to inform a lot more discussions. But yeah, that was certainly one of the biggest things that brought us here in the first place, which is kind of the transition to the next slide, which is a summary of that. And that is the state of Apple today, right? And I think that was something that specifically, Roman and John have discussed previously. And I think that's something I wanted to highlight for conversation's sake, the misconceptions.
Yeah, Roman, do you want to kind of kick us off there? Kind of your experience with managing Apple and misconceptions and those sorts of things?
I mean, I think these days, it used to be a lot more difficult to manage Apples, but these days it's very, very easy. And so it's easy for two reasons. I mean, one is because we have platforms like Addigy that we can use, but secondly, it's because of the way that the operating system that Apple develops allows you to do this. So what Addigy is doing is it's making use of features of the operating system that Apple has exposed to be able to be used for device management. And it all starts with what Apple call the Apple Business Manager. So when you buy a Apple computer, it automatically goes in there. Apple will then tell that device where to go because you've got the device management platform in there already. So you buy something, you open it up, it tells you to talk to Addigy. Addigy will then set everything up. And the operating system is very easy to manage, and then we can package up software very easily, and then it's deployed, and managing the versions is also very easy. So it's all just very easy. What's also really great about Addigy is you have many ways of then performing other stuff. So you have the idea of custom facts. So we can write any script that will run on the machine, and it can then output a value which we can then use. So for example, if we want to check for a specific piece of software or however many files are on the desktop or whatever we want to do. I mean, we could, so for example, say that if a user's got more than 20 files on their desktop, throw up an alert to say, you need to clear your desktop, even stuff like that. But it's very, very flexible. And I think the other thing at the moment is, gosh, I don't know. What are the misconceptions? Yeah, I think in terms of security, it is still a really difficult one. I think Apple did a very good PR job quite a while ago to persuade everyone that no one could ever write malware for the Mac. And I think it's part of Steve Jobs' kind of, whatever they call it, his effect of being able to, his reality distortion field.
Yes.
Yeah. But it definitely is the case. And I think that's one of the things, again, that's another opportunity which is if you can manage Macs, you can manage the operating system. If you also know about how to look after the security on a Mac, it's also great. The majority of it isn't actually on the Mac, and this again is why it's not such a big step to start looking after Macs. On a Mac, you need stuff like endpoint protection as you would anywhere else. You want to make sure that everything's encrypted with the file vault, but that's stuff out of the box, and that can be managed as well by Addigy. That will escrow the keys. But most of the other stuff then is all about email security, having a SOC, running vulnerability management, and then having a SIEM to collect logs. All those kind of things that would be the same with a company that you're looking after that's Windows based is completely transferable over to the Mac. So I think that's the thing. Yeah, device management on a Mac is really, really simple. Once you get your head around the way Apple does things, once you understand the Apple Business Manager and how it relates to Addigy, and once you've learned how to package software, it's pretty plain sailing. But that's the point, is like that's only a small element of looking after the IT of a Mac-based company. The rest is just as it would be on the Windows side.
Yeah, Apple, without saying Macs are unsecure, I wouldn't say Macs are unsecure. They're fantastic devices. Apple puts that first and foremost. But last year at their annual conference, WWDC, they announced a new mechanism to quickly deliver patches for vulnerabilities that are found in the wild. And last week, they released their first rapid security response. I think it was Monday or Tuesday that it appeared. And essentially what that is there is a threat in the wild. They won't call it a vulnerability, but a threat in the wild that's out there. And it worked really well. It installs quickly. If you've ever had to do an OS update on a Mac, it takes some time, right? It's going to be a 20-minute process. The RSR was a couple of minutes downloaded. It's much smaller. You don't get the full thing, and you're able to get it put in there. And again, you can, with a management tool and taking care of this, you just get that taken care of. And the other part of it too is we talk about securing the device, right? The device needs to be secure. But at the end of the day, the biggest threat to a machine is the users, right? They make a mistake or they click on a link or whatever else, and that's where something is can land on the machine, right? So again, if you've got that endpoint protection, you're making sure the user is someone who's in your IDP or something like that. You can control access, and then you're good to go. So again, just key things that you need out of your management tools.
Yeah, that kind of brings us to the next point too, which was, the point of this webinar was to talk about how Apple in general is something valuable, not just to understand for you to manage, but also, again, selfishly, how the CloudRadial part is how that affects your value, what you bring to the customers, and how that, again, interacts not as a standalone thing, but as an interactive thing. So I think the next thing we wanted to discuss before we dive into showing you the actual integration and what that looks like and how that can merge together is, what is the value specifically? So again, we saw a little bit in that report. I urge you guys to take a look at it because it talks, actual numbers, but even revenue wise, like there's still an opportunity to make more. But again, like what we talked about this with Roman previously, when we were talking about, we were prepping for the webinar, even the costs to manage Apple are different because sometimes you need to hire an Apple engineer. But in general, I think, John, take this part away because I think you had some thoughts on this too.
Right. Yeah. It's you are going to need Apple expertise, absolutely, to be able to do these. And Roman can take us through a little bit of that example as well. But again, it's being able to tell that full story, right? You as an MSP are here to help take care of an organization, right? It's not, I'm here to take care of your copy machines or your phone system. I'm going to help you holistically. And you bring Apple into the mix with that, and your story is just that much more broad, right? You're able to help them from front to back and everything you go. And it just really helps with that overall story of who you are when you're approaching new customers and those sorts of things. I guess, so Roman, do you kind of want to go into, like, with the combination, like with Addigy, with CloudRadial, how do you go about showing the value you're bringing to these customers? in these kinds of situations.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, when we're talking to clients these days, I mean, they're larger. You know, if you've got a client that's only got like 5 computers, it's a bit harder to argue the benefits of device management. We still can, but when you've got 20, 30, 50, 100 users, or maybe even more, and you've got lots of people starting and leaving, it's really important to make sure that that onboarding works really well. So we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the clients and thinking about the fact that they're hiring people, and then also putting ourselves in the shoes of the person who just started. So it starts right at the beginning when you're setting up a machine for a new user. You want to make sure that that new starter has got a good experience, that everything's nice and smooth, and as we said before, that they've got all the applications they need, everything's set up properly, and it's also secure. It makes the employee feel that they've made the right choice, they've joined the right company. So we in IT have a quite large part to play on that first day of the member of staff. So having a tool like Addigy to make sure that we've got all the configurations set up, they're in the right policy, they're going to have access to all the right applications, they're going to be able to log in with the same user. So, you know, we can either use Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 login to authenticate as well. It just makes things a lot simpler. The other thing as well, security is a bigger deal these days. In the UK, we have a standard called Cyber Essentials that's put together by GCHQ, which is the UK equivalent of the NSA. A lot of smaller firms are now having to prove that they take security seriously. And this standard has a lot of requirements. So you're not using admin users on your computer. You've got a firewall activated. You've got the computer encrypted, and you're patching the computer and all the software within 30 days. And also that you don't have software installed on the computer that's not necessary for business. And again, Addigy can help with this greatly. And also with CloudRadial, we can easily generate reports of all the software. We can also show computers that are out of warranty as well, and pull those together and use those in the planner for our QBRs. So those 2 things are really important. The onboarding, the offboarding, and the security are really where that helps. The other thing as well is if there are big changes that need to be made, I mean, it can be as simple as, you know, changing the desktop background to like the new branding of the company, or they start using a new bit of software. And again, what's really handy is if, for example, a client now wants to use vulnerability management where we're scanning to see what vulnerabilities there are on the computer, it's very, very easy, obviously, for us to package that up, deploy it out. And again, we can create policies so we can have a small initial test group and then release that software wider later on as well. So all those things just make everything much, much easier. But again, the thing is, it's for us to focus on the business, about their business needs, and then translate those into IT needs. So this is less about, you know, specifically Addigy and CloudRadial, but those tools then help us do that. And as I said, you know, security is a big deal these days. I think that's all I can say on that point. I don't know if there's anything else you want me to talk about.
I think that's about right. I think that again, we were hoping for, and I might turn this one over to John, to actually see the tangible, like how that looks. And again, I want to talk about how that looks in CloudRadial, because you had mentioned the QBR, and again, it's like really the spirit of this webinar, besides just being like, yeah, you know, Apple devices and management thereof, is that greater like rolling them in, understanding how to manage them, proving that, having that proper discussion with the customers, and then being able to advance that. So you're not really fixated on Apple versus Windows. You're trying to help the business.
So on that point, I mean, and this is, so as we gradually transition from a break fix to an MSP, one of the things that we had to do, and again, with the advent of the cloud, it's about trying to reposition ourselves as engineers who work in a server room to be consultants that work in the boardroom.
Right.
So specifically, this is a feature of CloudRadial, and what's really handy is with Addigy, with all the information it provides, if there's certain things that we want to discuss about out-of-date software or machines that need replacing or whatever, we can use that information that Addigy's brought into CloudRadial to bring into our planner to then discuss. But we have technical consultants on a quarter-by-quarter basis. We have our quarterly business reviews with all our clients. And the planner then has everything that we're recommending and everything that's then planned as an improvement for our clients over the next 4 quarters, plus everything that is done. And this has really transformed the business because it's very easy for us, A, to show the value we're providing by showing everything we've done, B, to show that we've got a proper plan for their IT roadmap over the course of the next year. And also, this is what they want. They don't want to be chasing an MSP saying, how about this? What should we do here? What we can do is we can then show them that we're thinking about them and we're making these recommendations. And the other thing that makes this much easier is that we can bundle up a whole set of recommendations, and then we can deploy them across all our clients using CloudRadial. So we can create content and then push that out. And that's really transformed us into more of a partner and shifting us more from an IT partner to a business partner. And this is why it's important, is that we used to be just receiving the conclusion. The business, the board, the leadership team would be having their business conversations, and then they go, okay, we've made a decision. Then they'd come to us with a decision, and we would then just have to implement that. By getting more involved with the business side of things, and that just means asking different questions, we can help in some way steer that business decision so that they end up making the right conclusion, so that the IT that we then have to implement makes more sense. But yeah, the planner is the key to that. And it's really, really helped. And it's very visual. Our clients will love it. It's really simple. They can, again, see what we've done, what we're planning, and what we're recommending. So it's really, really valuable, really cool.
First of all, thank you. Second of all, if you ever need a job, let me know, because I appreciate the way you see things. But yeah, I figured that, John, maybe we can kind of just discuss it and show it really quickly, and then we can have a little Q&A. But let's
do that.
Let's get to taking a look. And I'd like, I think you should take a first stab at it. I think you should have screen share capabilities if you want to take a.
I do.
Take a seat. Take a look.
Let me get over there. Make sure I share. It's funny. You work in a tool all day long, every day, and then when you're in the middle of a presentation like this, and you're like, "Huh, what am I sharing?"
Right.
So hopefully you see. Yeah, hopefully you see Addigy right now.
We do.
All right. So again, I'm just going to go very quickly. We don't have to go into too much depth, but I am going to kind of go into what Roman was talking a little bit about in terms of the compliance. We'll focus on that a little bit, because then how you can use that to go look at the value you're bringing. But again, when you come into Addigy in the morning, the first thing you're going to do is we've got a dashboard. What's the state of the union in terms of what we're looking at? People land here, they kind of take a look at, I got one device not under MDM, maybe I need an action, or if I got some security issues that potentially I need to take a look at. I can see what OSs are my devices on, iOS, Mac. We manage TVs, Apple TVs, iPads, etc. But the heart and soul of Addigy, again, I was talking earlier about our what we call go live capabilities. And again, you come in here, and this is a list of all the devices in the environment. We're in our demo environment right now, but one of the things that Rome was talking about was compliance. And you can see, oddly, in our demo environment, obviously our salespeople have been working hard in here because we've got a lot of machines that are out of compliance right now. It's great to be on the product side because I can always blame the sales team. They're probably not on this call, so they won't hear me. But again, from here, I can take a lot of actions too. Let's say somebody calls you in a panic. My car was just broken into, my Mac just got stolen. What's going to happen? And oddly enough, I've been in that situation, and that we were in Cupertino after we had just been at Apple headquarters, which made it even more interesting. Yeah, you're like, and you're like, oh man, I need to wipe this device very quickly. I can come in here with a quick erase device. Boom, it's going to erase. I can actually put a code on that. So effectively that Mac is turned into a brick, whether it's an iOS device, a Mac. So if a thief gets it, they're not going to be able to do anything with it. They can't reactivate it or anything. It's got to re-enroll into MDM with this vendor to be able to unlock it, or you have to add the secure code. But again, you've got an active machine. I can see what my CPU is. The facts, that we were talking about earlier is you take a quick look at activation lock is enabled. Who are the active users on it? And what you're able to do then is to build monitors on these. You know, for instance, let's go look at scrolling, clicking. So if I go to free disk space, I got 383. Again, I could build alerting and monitoring on this. This gets under 20 gigabytes, for instance. Alert me, maybe clean out disk cache, things like that, take care of those things automatically. So you can start to build automations that help make your team more effective so you don't have to go hands-on. We want to do as much for you automatically so you don't have to be hands-on unless you absolutely have to. So
yeah, and just on that point. So one of the things that we've done is we've created a custom fact, which will tell us which country that computer's in. And when we get an alert from the Security Operations Center saying we've just seen a login from this country, you can quickly cross-reference that with a computer in Addigy, for example.
That's awesome. We love those sorts of things. And again, we've got the catalog where you're able to build your MDM profiles, like you want to turn on file vault disk encryption. You want to set password policies. Passwords need to be this big, things like that. To be able to build the monitoring maintenance items, be able to install software. We'll take a quick look at our security and compliance. And right now, Addigy out of the box comes with 4 different compliance settings. So you can very quickly just come in. If you want to edit the NIST compliance, change it to your needs, you can. Or if you just want to apply this to all your devices, you can turn it on, set it, and all those devices are going to report, are they compliant with it or not? And again, we'll just go take a quick look at this right now. But again, you can see these rules. We're actually pulling these directly from essentially the open source vendors. So we continually monitor the repository where we put these rules. They come into Addigy and they just generate themselves. And we're also about to add automatic remediation. So for instance, if File Vault did get turned off, we'll have the scripts in place to be able to turn File Vault back on so that device goes back into compliance. But again, when you look at the value you can provide, if you've got customers who are thinking about maybe they need to, if they want to go SOC 2 compliance, maybe they need to be HIPAA compliant or some of the standards in Europe, you're able to work from these. You'll be able to go in and say, you know what, we're going to be able to just do this for you out of the box, get you in a better secure location. You can get your cyber insurance, you can get your certifications and things like that, and then do all kinds of reporting on it. Again, this is just quick look at the monitoring page. If something gets triggered, you can tie it into your help desk ticket or your help desk system too, tie it into CloudRadial, your PSA, and just automatically generate a ticket there. So your techs can work in that PSA and only come in Addigy when they really need to, if they're necessary. So that's the nickel tour of Addigy, super fast with Firehose. Ricky, do you want to take it away with CloudRadial side?
Yeah, sure.
I think just before that, just occurred to me. I mean, there's a lot of valuable stuff that's done out of the box, which doesn't require patching. Obviously, if you've got to bundle all the software together, then upload it, it's a lot of work. So there's 2 things. One is that Addigy has its own library of software that it packages up for you that you can use, and there we are, public library. And some of it's done by Addigy, and then other companies are also putting stuff in there. And the second thing is that there's support for something called apps and books. So it's the Apple App Store for computers, just like the App Store for iOS. So there's lots of different software already in there. So for example, all the Microsoft Office apps are in there as well. So even though you have to do a bit of packaging up for some of the software, a lot of the stuff will be done for you. And even for the stuff that you might be doing yourself, there are tools such as Auto PKG that will automatically package software for you with recipes. Now, obviously, you want to be checking that stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that helps. It's not all done manually.
And again, I think, Ricky, you can't hire Roman because I'm going to hire him to demo our product.
We can share them. We can do like a 50-50 split.
All right, there we go. There we go. I like that.
I got them on the weekends, it's fine.
Shared custody.
Right.
And I will stop sharing.
Sure.
And
And I
over
think
to you.
you have a question from Elmer in the Q&A. You may want to take a look at.
Got it. All right. right.
But in the meantime, yes, I will share my screen. I have an ultra wide, so hopefully it doesn't look too janky on the old webinar. And I'll try to zoom in. But yeah, same thing. I'm not trying to hawk CloudRadial too much. I just want to talk about, again, that bigger concept of where Apple fits in the customer experience, because again, ultimately, like CloudRadial, but also just realistically, we understand that, like, technicality aside, the person that pays the bills is the customer in one way or the other. And we just think that, like, hey, whether it's Apple, Windows, Linux, or Temple OS, doesn't matter. It's like, we're talking about something that you want to be able to have kind of integrated and shown in a way that fits the bill for everything. So when we talk about how we can take all these things and display them, putting them in the portal is a good way to do it. And specifically, we want to make sure that we integrate that with stuff that is both tangible and usable for the day-to-day stuff. So again, without going too much into demo, like your onboard, offboard forms, stuff that integrates with your PSA is great for you as the MSP, you to provide that experience, but it's not good enough, right? We know that PSAs have built-in portals. We know that some of those are pretty good too. Like, honestly, it's not even that they're bad or they don't work. Sometimes they're fine. The issue is that when you get to the part where you're talking to the CEO, the CFO, CTO, maybe it's an IT head, maybe it's the office manager, those people don't just want onboarding forms. They don't just want bookmarks. They don't want stuff like that. They need something more, right? They need to understand what you're doing for them at the business level. And the more you can do that, the more you're going to be taken, like Roman was saying, not just as the IT partner, but as the business partner. So how do you get there? Well, again, it means taking the information and putting it out there and making it digestible in a way that they understand. So when it comes to Addigy specifically, we're taking the information from Addigy and we're actually piping it into CloudRadial alongside the Windows devices. We're not treating them really any differently. So what you're seeing right now on screen is a big list of Windows devices, and these are brought in from our own agent. We actually don't even integrate with RMMs in general. Addigy is one exception for various technical reasons. But there's something else that I think I've had people, and those that are familiar with CloudRadial know, we actually, again, like I just said, have our own agent. So that means that if I were to click on any one of these Windows computers, right, it's like a read-only RMM. It doesn't do anything. It's not intended to be a management console. It's purely to give the non-technical people a way to see their information in their portal. So if I want to see this Windows device, I can see the OS, if they're ready for Windows 11, if what their configuration is and stuff. With our agent, we also have a Mac one separate from Addigy, same thing. It brings in the information. But when you hook up Addigy, not only do you obviously get the benefits of actually being able to manage the device, you get the same thing, right? You're able to see that information pulled in a similar format. The reason that's super important for us, for the customer experience, like I said earlier, is because the average person doesn't care, right? The average owner of a business doesn't see them as Apple versus Windows versus whatever. They just go, I just want my business to run. Yeah, I don't care what marketing uses. I don't care what finance uses. Like, I just know that I have a company and we're trying to do this growth, whatever. So if you look at this, it really looks very similar down to like the configuration, the software, all that stuff. The reason that's important, like Roman was saying, is because if we can kind of put that into a similar format, what we can ultimately build to is not reading people tech specs for every single computer, right? We're talking about how can we actually make that into something actionable. So in one way or another, there's lots of ways to do this in CloudRadial, but I usually pull up these are called the policies. And the fact that you can run these different policies versus Windows and Apple data and both, or make separate policies, you can have a conversation where you sit down with somebody and you say, hey, we have problems with productivity issues, or there's security issues, or so on. So that way a non-technical person gets it in 2 seconds. You're not having to pull up just giant, technical reports. And then ultimately, if you can do this, like what Roman was saying, even this is too much to really walk people through. You can walk them through like a planner, right? So we have one built into CloudRadial, but again, I always say this on pretty much every webinar, as much as I'd love to be like, CloudRadial, you got to do it, this is the only way. It's not, but it's really helpful when everything is in one area, right? When you're able to have the contextual conversation to say, hey, we have a bunch of policy issues that we want to resolve. You can say that our salespeople love policy issues. They litter our demo account with them, but also serving a higher purpose, right? Not just saying we have security issues, we have this. Maybe that means that we need to come up with, I don't know, a managed IT consulting plan. And really that means that we need to talk about a greater thing. So now, again, you've really elevated the conversation from line items, super specific, like we've got to worry about this one that's OS is out of date. Well, that's an update, right? Maybe that's something you can do with Addigy in 2 seconds. What we really need to focus on is why are 40 of the Macs out of date? And why are we getting a bunch of slowness issues? And because really that's an efficiency issue. So you're elevating it, you're providing outcomes, you're not just talking about individual solutions. And if you can do that, again, not only are you more profitable, because you can obviously charge more for that, but you're also just a better partner, because now you're not talking about nitty gritty, you're talking about higher level stuff. So if we can help you get to that point, that's really the goal of this. And again, we believe at CloudRadial that only that can only really happen when you take everything at once, right? That's why this isn't just like the built-in portal to, Autotask. It's because you have to have that healthy balance of it between the tickets and the reports and whatever have you, and the data from your Apple devices, and make it client presentable, really is the gist of it.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that we use, which is also just, I think it's amazing. I mean, firstly, it's like everything's in one place. And we don't want our clients having to go here and there and look for emails that we've sent them. So the feature is that, I think it's called reports. Is that where it is? Yeah, you have an email address. And
yes,
so
report archive, certainly.
Yeah, this is amazing. So with all our backup systems, we will send the daily backup reports there. We even use it for billing. So on a monthly basis, we'll send a report on the number of users that have started and left, so that they can then reference that when they're looking at the invoice. But this is amazing. For some clients, they don't care, but with other ones where there's someone who's quite technical who wants to know everything, if they want to know if backups have worked or whatever, they can just jump in there and have a look. So we use that heavily. That's really, really neat.
Yeah, and that's something that we're really big on. If you notice, like, even, despite the fact that we're obviously in a CloudRadial Addigy webinar, we drop name brand stuff here all the time, because for us, we really believe, like I said, it's like there's no way in heck that any one tool, specifically in my nature, right? We're a CSA, we're trying to aggregate everything. I can't be a good backup tool. I can't be a good network tool. These are so specific tools. Again, we're not even going to try to become an RMM, but that stuff's important. So showing everything from the audit IT to the backup to the security to the Addigy, you name it, the concept is like, can the customer have that available to them? Can they access that information when they feel like it on their terms? So what Roman's talking about, if you don't know, is we allow you to send the reports from anything into CloudRadial, into these reports, or various different ways. Sometimes like Addigy is a direct integration via API. You can send, again, like you can come up with reports of your own handmade ones and send them in here. But the idea is that as you do that, every single one of these folders, individual to each customer you have, has its own individual email address. So it's really set it and forget it rules. But again, ultimately, the end result is not just to drown people in reports. It's to say, hey, you have it visual and ready to go at any given time, everything that I'm doing for you. Chances are we'll never talk about it, but if we do need to talk about it, or if you're getting audited and you're asking me why, if I'm really doing my job, I can go back and go, well, I am. And you can see all the backup, jobs that have run for the past 10 years. And let's take a look at which one you say that I didn't do or whatever happened. It's really nice to have that proof and not spend days having to dig through every tool and do that. And again, that's part of that greater concept. If you can do that, not only are you doing the conversation of like the policies that I talked about, where you're saying, yes, there's issues with productivity, maybe you're using other tools, and again, you're dragging that into the planner and having that higher level conversation. So it really is, again, less so focused on the tools and the thing, but the strategy of how you bring that conversation to the client and have that, again, higher level discussion. I believe, let me pull up my big boy view. That is really it. I think we only have a Q&A here. And I think that based on some of the chat stuff that I was seeing, it's a couple of different comments and stuff. Mostly the thing that I found interesting that I asked at the very beginning was, how long has everyone been managing their Apple devices? A couple different answers. Some for a really long time, right? Some for 10 plus years, some for recently. The thing that I think you'll notice again in the Addigy report is that, and same thing that Roman was saying, is that hybrid environments a lot more common. We're seeing a lot more people come and say that, like, yeah, they've had to step up their game or get into it, or even if you've been doing it, find a way to scale it up, which is again why we're talking about this, because having a one-off may be okay, but eventually when you start managing 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, 200 Apple devices, then it starts getting a little hairy. You want to start figuring out a way to scale that up and manage it properly.
Yeah, and I think managing Macs, it is completely possible, and with tools like Addigy, it makes it a lot easier. But there is, as with everything else, there is a lot of depth to things, and one of the things Apple is good at is hiding that. But Macs are not toys. They are very complex. and very advanced, and Apple does a lot of clever stuff between its hardware and its software, like the T2 security chip, which obviously speeds up encryption and stores stuff in a secure enclave. But in terms of costs of supporting Macs, I think it's not the extra software you need. Addigy is very favorably priced, and apart from that, in terms of spend, you really maybe just need some Macs that you can actually use. If you're not going to be able to do stuff unless you've got Macs to play with as well. But the biggest cost is really the expertise, and because there have been less Mac engineers and Macs are becoming more popular, all the good engineers have got jobs, or most of them have. So trying to attract good talent is expensive, and I think that's where the cost is. It's not anything else. It's really about getting hold of these people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we pulled up a poll because I know we're running very, very short on time, about if you'd like to learn any more general questions, demos, all that kind of stuff. We can always talk about that whenever you're ready. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask now so we can get to them, and then I will flash this on screen concurrently. Again, we're not trying to cut anyone off, but if you do want to go ahead and get a demo or take a look, or again, ask more specific deep dive questions, feel free either with us at CloudRadial, radials.io/demo, or for Addigy is addigy.com/demo as well. Let's see, a little chat action going on. Hey, thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. That one's for you, actually. John for Sean. Sean for John. Sean for John.
Oh, that's awesome. I'd love to hear it.
I think there are quite a few different MDM tools on the Mac side. Jamf is the most famous one, and one of the ones that if people don't know anything and they kind of go, well, what does Apple use, for example? One of the real strengths of Addigy is its multi-tenant setup. So as you will know, with using other multi-tenant tools as an MSP, it's really nice to be able to go into one pane of glass and be able to control everything. And all that work that you do for packaging software can be deployed across all clients on all computers on all clients. The second thing is, because we've been working with Addigy for a while, and I've spoken with John about certain issues and features and stuff. Addigy are a relatively small company in comparison to other ones, but they're still quite they're still quite large, a lot of expertise within it. But you're small enough to listen, and that's really heartening. There's nothing worse for an MSP to be working with a vendor that you can see just doesn't really care too much and says, we'll just go into the community and raise a request, and maybe if enough people vote for it in a few years, it might happen. But secondly, the pace of change, the number of updates that come out, it's all really impressive, and it's just really nice to be working with a company that wants to be ahead of the game and is always looking out for stuff. And again, when Apple messes up, Addigy, if it's at all possible, will put workarounds out very quickly, as you have done recently with MDM. And the other thing as well is like we have a choice. We can choose different people. It's and vendors. And we are looking for different things. But with Addigy, it's one company for sure that we have no inclination of leaving. So if you haven't already started thinking of one, Addigy is a really good tool to be using. From my perspective, I'm not being paid for that. Yeah, it's really good.
We can get a pizza party or something. But yes, Nathan, it for sure will. We usually, as soon as the recording, the question was for everybody who's not reading the chat, is this recording going to be available? Yes, we will take this, we'll post it on YouTube typically, and then we'll send a link out, I believe is the way that it usually works. And then, and I think John has a couple questions he's going to answer as well from the QA live.
How does Addigy compare to solutions such as Kaseya VSA? I know Kaseya announced at their conference just a couple weeks ago that they're adding MDM support, but it's MDM is interesting because on the surface it looks like a pretty straightforward protocol to be able to work with and implement. And you can get the basics working in a hurry. But what you're going to find with Kaseya is the total power you're going to be able to have with a Mac is going to be limited. They just again they're great at what they do with Windows and those sorts of things. But again, Apple expertise takes time and money and energy to be able to do it. So it is going to be a little bit limited. Kind of the reverse of this question is we get asked often, you know, what you guys do for Apple is fantastic. What about bringing it to Windows? And we're like, we could, but that would mean going out and getting all the same kind of level of expertise we've already built up on the Apple side of things, building the teams around that, and then what we built has been built over a number of years to be able to get where we are. And again, you can do some of the basics with VSA, but again, it's going to be limited in terms of full power, monitoring, remediation. We're recently have been seeing some issues with OS updates working on Macs, and we've actually built some remediation into the system as Apple's trying to get everything figured out. What's happening? Why is this not working? And again, because we're focused on the Apple platform, we're able to do those kinds of things where Kaseya is just not going to fall into that. I am getting paid to talk about this, unlike Roman, although Roman does a better job than me, is what I'm saying. Second question, Jim, lower minimum license count. You're going to love me for this, but that one you'll have to talk to our sales team about, because I am not qualified to be able to answer that question. But again, if you want to reach out to you probably just go hit our website and fill out a request for a demo, and they can get in touch with you and you guys can talk about that, figure out how that would work.
Yeah, just on that point about Kaseya VSA, the other thing as well about Addigy is the user interface is very easy to use. VSA is a lot more convoluted, so but yeah, it's a long road, and for them to build out the those features is going to take quite a while. The other thing that's interesting actually is that Apple doesn't have much of an MDM solution themselves. They bought a company I can't remember. Fleetsmith, and they've rolled it into a bundle called Apple Business Essentials, but it's the capabilities are quite narrow, and it hasn't had a lot of uptake. The difference on the Windows side, obviously, if you've got the likes of what was Intune, so that there's a difference there. Just for people who don't know, Apple doesn't have really a full MDM suite that compares anything like to Addigy.
Yep. All right. I think that's about it, mostly because I believe we've ran a little bit over, but I really appreciate everybody showing up. And again, if there's questions, if there's stuff we didn't get to, please, again, if it's not the demo, feel free to reach out to us directly and just ask questions. They'll make our way back to us. I want to say thank you to both, obviously, John, and especially thank you to you, Roman, for joining us and giving us insights and real deal stuff and not just hearing two vendors yap for an hour. That's always my favorite. So appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Cool.
Thank you. This is a lot of fun. Thank you, Roman.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch you later. Bye, everybody.